In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on January 10th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. SMU versus Duke. Cameron Indoor on a Saturday feels less like a gym and more like a furnace, and SMU is walking straight into it for this one. You have a long-established powerhouse sitting at roughly 14-1, sitting comfortably in that top tier of the rankings, hosting a newcomer to the conference that has stormed out to around 12-3 with a shiny number of its own next to the school name. It is classic stuff, the old money program with banners everywhere against the ambitious guest that wants to prove its resume is not just a December story. What makes this matchup fun is that the reputations clash as much as the jerseys. SMU comes in with that free-flowing, push-the-pace style that has turned plenty of nights into track meets, piling up points and playing with the confidence of a team that believes it can hang a big number on anyone. Duke, on the other hand, has been living in that space where wins are not just wins, they are often comfortable wins, with opponents getting squeezed into modest totals while the home team racks up margin. If you think about it like a workplace, SMU is the energetic startup that loves big brainstorms and fast moves, and Duke is the firm that has seen every market cycle and knows exactly when to press, when to slow, and when to smother. There is also the little detail that these two already got acquainted last season, and Duke walked out of Dallas with a win by more than 20, which is a pretty loud way to introduce yourself to a new league rival. That kind of result does not guarantee anything in the new season, of course, but it does tell you the gap in physicality and composure was real when they shared the floor. Now you flip the script and put SMU in one of the most unforgiving road environments in college hoops, where those little 3-minute stretches can feel like storms, and it is not hard to imagine momentum swings turning sharp and fast. From the betting angle, books have treated Duke like the clear power here, hanging a spread in that double-digit neighborhood and challenging you to believe the underdog can stay on the same rung for 40 minutes. SMU has often been kind to bettors catching points, so it is very tempting to say, they just keep it close again, right? But when you think through how this kind of game actually tends to play out, you get a picture of SMU throwing early punches with pace, then running into a wall of length and bodies as Duke leans on depth, size, and that crowd that smells blood whenever the home team strings together a couple of stops. Those short, sharp runs, the 6-0 and 8-0 bursts that come out of nowhere in this building, are exactly how a spread that looks big on your screen can start to feel smaller and smaller as the second half wears on. As our first pick for this matchup, the Duke Blue Devils to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total number the market has hung on this game sits up in that mid-150s neighborhood, which is a very clear hint that odds makers are expecting plenty of fireworks, or at least want you to think hard about them. It is easy to see why at first glance. SMU has been living in that high-scoring world, often flirting with 90 on the scoreboard, playing with tempo and confidence, and creating the kind of rhythm that makes neutral fans reach for the remote just to catch the highlights. Duke is not exactly shy on offense either, but the way its games feel is different. Their calling card at home has been control, using their size and structure to keep opponents somewhere in the mid-60s, while the offense hums along with enough efficiency to make final margins look very tidy. So you end up with this tension. One team loves chaos, the other is very comfortable turning the same game into a series of carefully managed possessions. Here is the thing that matters for the total. Big ranked matchups in a tight arena often start out fast, with adrenaline and crowd noise pushing everyone to go a little quicker, then they settle into something more deliberate once both coaches adjust. Timeouts get used aggressively, rotations get shorter, and suddenly every trip feels a bit heavier, which naturally trims a few possessions off what you might expect from the raw season numbers. Transition chances dry up when players get back on defense with real urgency. And those long, probing half-court possessions, where the ball swings side to side just to find one good look, eat into the clock little by little. So even if SMU brings its usual offensive ambition, it is walking into a setting where mistakes get punished, rushed shots turn into loud runouts the other way, and both benches understand that a string of empty trips can decide everything. That kind of tension tends to keep the final tally a few notches lower than the pure scoring resumes might suggest at first glance, especially when one side has already shown it can win comfortably while still keeping the lid pretty tight on opponents. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Penn State versus Purdue. Mackey Arena on a Saturday feels less like a college gym and more like an engine room that never shuts off, and Purdue has learned how to use that noise as a weapon. They come in with a record of 14-1, stacking a 6-game winning streak on top of a season where they are outscoring opponents by nearly 20 points per night, which is not just winning, it is stepping on teams a bit. You look back at those recent results and you can almost feel the pattern repeat. Big names and solid programs walking in confident, then walking out staring at a lopsided scoreboard, with Wisconsin getting handled on the road, Auburn and Marquette getting pulled apart on neutral floors, and even mid-major visitors like Kent State or Washington getting pushed into that 20-plus zone once the wheels start turning. The fun part is that it does not even feel like a fluke. It is a very grown team, built around an experienced backcourt, with that senior point guard who just broke the conference assist record running the show, and his wing partner stretching the floor, while the front court replaces one superstar big presence with a steady double-double threat and a transfer center who basically treats every missed shot like a personal challenge. So what you get is a group that spaces you out, makes your bigs defend where they are uncomfortable, then punishes every rotation with a drive, a kick, or a second chance putback. And that style tends to scale up in a home environment where the crowd feeds every run. Honestly, that is why the idea of a large number on the spread is not scary with this particular team, because the track record already shows that a theoretical minus 22.5 has been covered often enough in their recent home and overall sample that it almost feels like a personality trait. They do not relax just because the margin is big. They lean into it. Now set that beside Penn State, who sit at 9-6 overall and 0-4 in conference play, and who just spent a lot of emotional energy in a narrow home loss to a top-ranked Michigan squad, and you can feel the contrast. They are now forced to walk into one of the toughest buildings in college basketball without their leading scorer and main creator, Caden Mingo, the freshman guard who has been ruled out for a stretch after getting hurt in practice, and that means their offense has to be stitched together by committee, with big wings and a 7-footer trying to improvise in one of the loudest environments in the sport. That is a rough recipe because it usually leads to a lot of heavy legs in the second half and a lot of difficult possessions, while the home side just keeps running their stuff with the same tempo and precision. And in games like that, the scoreboard has a habit of breaking open in the final 10 minutes, not tightening up. As our first pick for this matchup, the Purdue Boilermakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Here is the thing, at first glance, when you hear a projected total in the low 150s in a game with a high-powered home offense, the instinct is to imagine an all-out track meet. Purdue can absolutely live in the 80s, and they have shown that many times, but this matchup has a twist that quietly pulls the scoring outlook in a calmer direction, and that twist is again Caden Mingo being out. He is not only the top scorer for Penn State, he is also their main decision-maker, leading them in assists and steals, basically touching the ball at the start of almost every serious half-court possession. And when you remove that kind of hub, especially on the road, you usually get longer possessions, more late shot clock heaves, and fewer clean transition chances. We already saw a preview of that style in their first game without him, that home meeting with Michigan that finished 74-72, which lands at a combined 146, and even that total had some late-game scoring noise as they scrambled to come back. Under Mike Rhodes, this Penn State group still leans on pressure and physicality. They throw a lot of long wings at the ball handler, and while that can create spurts of easy points, it also creates real volatility. One night they stumble to a low total like the 46-point outing at Pitt. Another night they explode into the 90s against a lighter opponent like North Carolina Central. That personality keeps the ceiling fairly high, but it also means that in a tough setting, without their primary guard, the floor for their scoring can drop into that low 60s range pretty quickly. On the other side, Purdue are more than capable of turning this into a free-flowing game, but we have seen enough of their comfortable wins to know that when they build a big lead, the tempo in the second half often softens. Those wins over Auburn and Marquette are good examples. The scoreboard looks brutal, yet the combined totals land in the 130s or low 140s once the game flips from competitive chess match to long glide to the finish, with bench units on the floor and the clock quietly draining. So when you put all of that together, a strong home offense that can slow things down late, a short-handed road team that will probably be grinding through possessions without its main creator, and a total sitting in that 152.5 neighborhood, the most reasonable picture is a game where the favorite still does the bulk of the scoring, but the combined number sneaks under rather than soaring far above the projection. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Arizona versus TCU. This matchup feels like one of those early season checks where you find out who is actually built for March and who just had a nice few weeks on the schedule so far. Arizona walks in unbeaten, rolling, and acting like a 1 seed in January, while TCU is playing host in a building that gets loud fast whenever the Frogs sniff an upset. You can almost picture it already, that tight purple crowd trying to rattle a group that has been steamrolling everyone in front of them lately. Here is the thing, Arizona is not just winning, they are squeezing the air out of games. They score in bunches, they defend hard enough that each trip feels like work, and they rebound like the ball personally offended them. That combination is brutal on opponents who do not have 40 minutes of poise in them. You can see it in the way their games look on TV, long stretches where the other team is stuck on the same number for what feels like 5 minutes while Arizona keeps stacking points and free throws. It is not flashy analytics talk, it just feels like a team that wins the boring details over and over. TCU, to be fair, is nobody's warm-up act. They have quality wins in their pocket, they have gone toe-to-toe with serious programs, and they just reminded everyone at Kansas that they can build a big lead on a top team, even if they then reminded everyone how quickly that lead can vanish. That collapse in Lawrence is the sort of scar that can either rattle a team or sharpen it, and we are about to find out which way this group leans. They defend well when they are locked in, they can punch back on the glass, and their guard play has enough juice to keep them hanging around when crowds get chaotic. The problem is how all of that lines up against this particular Arizona build. TCU's front court is already under strain, with one rotation big done for the year and another dealing with an issue that has kept him off the floor recently, which is not exactly what you want when a deep, physical, confident group is coming to town and happily playing through contact all night. Arizona, meanwhile, is walking in clean on the injury report, fresh and comfortable in games where whistles pile up. That matters when you are talking about 4 or 5 separate waves of size and energy being thrown at a short-handed front line. Then you look at how the market is treating this. Books are hanging Arizona as a healthy road favorite, around that 8.5-point range at some shops, which is their way of saying, yeah, this isn't your average road test. Arizona has been kind to spread backers lately, repeatedly covering even with big numbers attached. That is usually a sign that the gap between their median performance and their ceiling is not that wide, which is a fancy way of saying their normal game is already pretty scary. TCU, for its part, has had its own strong against the spread stretches, especially as an underdog, but this particular matchup asks them to handle relentless interior pressure for the full 40 with dented front court depth and recent late-game shakiness still fresh in everyone's mind. If this turns into the kind of grind where Arizona keeps chipping away with second chance points, free throws, and long defensive stands, you can very easily see the scoreboard drifting away late rather than sticking inside a single possession sweat. As our first pick for this matchup, the Arizona Wildcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Odds makers have put this total number in that tricky high range, sitting in the low 150s, with some spots ticking closer to 153, which tells you they expect a real game, not a rock fight. It is not a lazy number either. It is the kind of total where you have to ask, do both of these teams live in the 80s long enough for me to be happy? And you cannot just shrug that off. Arizona's style pretty much dares games to get big. They push the ball enough that you do not see many dead possessions. They love to attack the paint instead of settling for wild jumpers, and they live at the foul line. That combination is friendly to high totals. Driving and posting means fewer empty trips, and frequent trips to the stripe mean the clock is stopped while points keep stacking. They also have this habit of going on those 10-2, 12-3 runs that flip a modest pace into a game that suddenly feels furious because the other side has to answer in a hurry. TCU comes at things from a slightly different rhythm. They are not naturally in a rush every trip, but they have enough offense to run when the game asks them to. We have seen them in stretches where they throw punches with high-powered teams, score comfortably into the 80s, and then things spiral because of turnovers or late-game nerves. From a total perspective, that volatility is not a bug, it is a feature. When a team that can score also has a bit of chaos in its DNA, you get exactly the kind of frantic final 5 minutes that bettors quietly love. Quick shots, early clock threes, late fouling, all of that is jet fuel for an over. There is also the trend piece quietly sitting in the background. Arizona has been playing in games that lean higher on the scoreboard lately, with several recent contests sailing past their posted numbers and a strong pattern of overs specifically against Big 12 opponents. TCU, interestingly, has seen more unders in its recent box scores, but a lot of those came in matchups that did not feature an offense as relentless as this one or a whistle as busy as Arizona tends to generate inside. So you get this neat little tension. On paper, one team screaming points, the other side showing more modest totals, and the numbers sitting right in that zone where you have to decide which force pulls harder. When you imagine the actual night, though, it is easy to see a path where things escalate. Arizona's pressure encourages quicker decisions. TCU cannot spend 20 seconds of possession walking it up and grinding it out if they are chasing. If the Frogs keep it competitive, the crowd pushes them to run back after makes instead of slowly resetting, and if Arizona builds a lead, you get the usual parade of late-game fouls, desperation threes, and extended garbage time scoring. That is how a total that looks a little steep at first can quietly drift up into the high 150s by the final horn. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Oklahoma State versus Iowa State. Hilton Coliseum on a Saturday feels less like a gym and more like a sound experiment that somehow got NCAA approval. The place was built to keep the noise in, not let it out, and you can almost picture that bowl shape hugging the court while everything around it starts to buzz. You drop an unbeaten, top 3 Iowa State team in that kind of setting, sitting at 15-0 with everyone in Ames convinced this group is special, and the air gets heavy in a good way. They are not just winning, they are winning with a very clean identity. Top 10 in adjusted offense, top 5 in adjusted defense, and one of the 3 best efficiency margins in the country. So they do not just beat you, they sort of erase what you want to do over 40 minutes. The recent Big 12 run fits that story. They beat West Virginia 80-59, then walked into Waco and held Baylor to 60 in a 70-60 win, and both of those had that feeling of, oh, this is over, well before the clock agreed. You can almost hear the crowd feeding off each defensive stop more than the made shots, which is a fun twist for a team that is also very capable on the offensive end. Now look at the other bench. Oklahoma State comes in at 13-2-0 and plays like the team that wants every game to feel like a track meet where the scoreboard operator gets a workout. They are top 5 nationally in adjusted tempo, right near the front of the line when you sort by pace, putting up around 90 points a night while giving up close to 80. At home, that style is a blast. We just saw it when they dropped 87-76 on number 25 UCF, hitting 10 of 19 from 3 and turning that game into the kind your rec league buddy brags about later. But that same approach can get exposed when the talent and discipline on the other side go up, and the 102-80 loss at Texas Tech showed what happens when teams do not let them run free. That is the basic tension here. One team wants chaos, the other is very comfortable forcing you to run your offense through mud. Iowa State can play quickly when the game asks for it, but they are at their happiest when every possession feels like a small exam, where you are constantly being asked, can you make this next tough read too? Instead of, can you just sprint faster? And honestly, that plays even better at home, where every deflection sounds louder and every turnover feels like a small landslide for the other bench. There is another layer that matters if you are thinking about the spread. Oklahoma State's rotation has not really had that steady, locked-in feel all year. Multiple players have already missed stretches with injuries, a key forward is shut down for the season with a hip issue, and a couple of others are still carrying those questionable tags that make coaches pretend they are not stressed. Iowa State, outside of a guard that has already been ruled out for the year, has had its main group together and building rhythm. In a loud building, with a deep, confident favorite and an underdog that has moving parts, that difference in stability can show up once you get late into the second half. And if you want a little emotional seasoning, there is plenty. Oklahoma State has taken 8 of the last 10 in this series and handed Iowa State a 74-68 loss in Stillwater last season when the Cyclones were ranked 9th. Players and coaches never say they circle it in red, but fans remember, staff remembers, and guys in that locker room know who has had the upper hand recently. So now you set that history against this specific version of Iowa State, in this specific building, as a heavy favorite asked to cover a big number, and it suddenly feels less like a trap and more like the kind of spot where a focused, elite team leans into its strength and keeps the foot down. As our first pick for this matchup, the Iowa State Cyclones to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Books have hung a total number in the mid-160s, around 164.5, which is basically an invitation to expect a game that never takes a breath. You can see why. Oklahoma State plays as if the shot clock is a suggestion, not a rule, sitting fifth in adjusted tempo, scoring just north of 90 points per game while allowing close to 80. Their last couple of outings fit that profile perfectly. The 102-80 loss at Texas Tech and the 87-76 win over UCF were classic, bring your track spikes nights. On the surface, you might think that tossing Iowa State into that blender means we get 40 minutes of pure fireworks. But here is the thing, Iowa State might not be slow, they are comfortable in the upper 60s to low 70s in possessions, yet their defense bends games toward their preferred rhythm. They give up a little over 60 points per game and do it against real opponents, not just early cupcake season. We just watched Baylor come in averaging more than 90 and walk out with only 60. West Virginia managed 59. Those are not random. Those are the kinds of scores you get when a team uses physical defense, sharp rotations, and smart help to turn first options into tough shots and second options into rush decisions. High totals at numbers like 164.5 need two things to really get home: pace and efficiency. Pace alone is not enough if one offense keeps running into a wall. With Iowa State's defense playing at this level, it is fair to expect Oklahoma State's scoring to come back closer to earth than the raw season average suggests. They will still try to push off misses and makes, that is their identity, but landing in the mid or even high 70s against this defense is very different from landing in the 80s or 90s. Then there is the shooting piece, which can look wild from game to game and still follow a very human pattern. Oklahoma State's 87-76 win over UCF was fueled by that 10 for 19 clip from deep, just over 52%, which is the kind of night everyone remembers. Those games create a glow around an offense, even if they are the high end of what is realistic over time. Now put that next to what Iowa State just did to Baylor, holding them to 5 for 27 from 3. You do not need advanced math to feel the contrast. It is not that Oklahoma State suddenly forgets how to shoot. It is that the looks get a little more rushed, a little more contested, and the box score comes back closer to normal. There is also the rhythm of how college games work when someone starts to pull away. If the score ever gets stretched out, coaches on both sides usually stop encouraging track meet basketball and start thinking about clock and health. Possessions get a little longer, the ball sticks a bit more, and bench players see extra time, which tends to lower shot quality and sometimes lowers tempo too. An 86-70 type of final, which would still feel like a good offensive night for one side and a decent enough effort for the other, sounds loud when you say it out loud, but it still sits under that mid-160-something number. So while the matchup gives off firework energy at first glance, the mix of elite defense, likely three-point regression for Oklahoma State, and the way game flow usually behaves when things tilt, all lean toward a scoring total that lands under what the market is asking for. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. BYU versus Utah. Rivalry games always carry their own weather, and this one rolls in with BYU bringing the storm. They walk into this matchup at 14-1, sitting comfortably inside the national top 10, and they have been treating scoreboards like suggestion boxes rather than limits, scoring around 88 a night on close to 50% shooting, with an average margin near plus 20. They play like a group that expects to control the evening rather than react to it. Utah, sitting 8-7, has a very different profile, still scrappy, still dangerous in their own building, but giving up roughly as many points as they score and constantly trying to patch defensive leaks on the fly. Here is the thing. Last season, these two traded blows, Utah stealing one in overtime in Salt Lake City, then BYU answering with a comfortable win in Provo, and that memory still lingers in the background. The twist now is that this version of BYU feels more mature, deeper, and far more comfortable carrying the pressure of expectation on the road. Their identity is built around spacing, constant movement, and shooting with a steady stream of threes, roughly 9 makes on about 25 attempts, and multiple creators who can get downhill when defenders overreact to the perimeter threat. It looks a little like a modern pro offense dropped into a college rivalry, which makes sense with the staff and the structure behind it. Utah counters with pride and punch. Their backcourt, led by Terrence Brown and Don McHenry, can pour in points in bunches and absolutely swing stretches of play. And that kind of confidence at home is never meaningless. They attack, they get downhill, they get to the line, and for a while that energy can rattle even a polished opponent, especially in a rivalry crowd where every whistle and every run feels bigger than it really is. The catch, and honestly it is a big one, is that Utah still has to live with a defense that has been living in the bottom tier nationally in points allowed and comes into this one with wing depth already stretched. With players like Jacob Patrick and Babacar Faye sidelined, the rotation has less margin for foul trouble, less flexibility on matchups, and fewer fresh bodies to throw at wave after wave of BYU drives, cuts, and kick-out threes. So the question becomes simple, even if the game will not be. Is Utah capable of sustaining that punch for 40 minutes against a team that keeps coming in layers, or does the talent and depth gap show up gradually, the way a slow tide starts to pull a boat away from the dock without anyone noticing for the first few minutes? BYU has already shown a tendency this season to build runs, stash them away, then build more, especially in recent blowouts over solid high major opponents, and that pattern matters when you are talking about a significant favorite on the road. They do not need every possession to be perfect, they just need enough windows where their spacing, their size on the perimeter, and their rhythm shooting create a stretch of 10 or 12 unanswered points. In a rivalry that already tilts toward their form, their current habits point toward a result where early emotion keeps it interesting, but the stronger roster slowly stretches the scoreboard until it reflects the gap most people expected anyway. As our first pick for this matchup, the BYU Cougars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Odds makers are not shy here. They have hung a total number in the mid-160s, and that is their way of saying they expect a track meet rather than a slugfest. When you look at the profiles, you can see why. BYU is living in that high-octane zone, close to 88 points per game, and the style backs up the numbers. They shoot efficiently, they let it fly from deep, and they rarely seem interested in easing off just because the lead is comfortable. If anything, their rhythm gets better when they are ahead, because they play freer, the ball hops side to side, and secondary scorers start punishing tired legs who are already worried about the primary threats. That is how games sneak from competitive to how did they get into the 90s again. Utah, on the other side of the equation, brings its own brand of chaos. They score about 80 a night, they give up about 80 a night, and that combination is tailor-made for high totals. Brown and McHenry handle a big share of the offense, and when guards like that are attacking all game, you get drives, you get free throws, and you get possessions that end quickly, one way or another. Then you add bigs like Keanu Dawes and Josh Hayes cleaning the glass and turning misses into second chances, and you get extra possessions that quietly stack more points on the board. Here is the thing that really nudges this game into track meet territory. Both teams are comfortable from deep, each taking well over 23s a night and hitting around that 37% mark, which means a handful of quick bursts can turn a normal box score into something that looks more like a video game. You get a couple of trips where BYU hits back-to-back threes, Utah answers with a 3 and a foul, and suddenly a quiet few minutes exploded into a 15-point swing in total scoring. Rivalry energy tends to push pace too, because players want to run, they want the big highlight, and coaches sometimes have to live with a slightly faster tempo than they would prefer on paper. And then there is the whistle. In heated games, officials usually try to take control early, which can mean more fouls and more free throws. Late, if the margin is not completely out of hand, you get the usual parade to the line, intentional fouls, and quick possessions, all of which act like fertilizer for the total. Even if the game itself settles into patches of sloppy play, the combination of three-point volume, free throw volume, and two offenses that already lean towards scoring rather than grinding gives this matchup a very clear scoring personality. It looks like one of those nights where the number feels high before the tip, then you glance up midway through the second half and think, yeah, that tracks. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.